Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is The Protector. My name is Peter and I'm your host today. I'm very excited to introduce you to today's guest, my friend Armando Santana. He's a product management professional with extensive experience in launching award-winning high-volume consumer products. Armando will talk about how to build products or services that people are passionate about. He knows because he did it at Amazon, Disney, Qualcomm, just to mention a few. At Amazon, he was responsible for the Amazon App Store on Kindle Fire tablets. At Qualcomm, he was responsible for defining and delivering disruptive augmented reality technologies, where one of the products he was working on was winning the Connected Toy of the Year award. And at Disney, he worked on various strategic and confidential projects, resulting in multiple patents filed. Long story short, he really knows what is he talking about. He has a track record on it. Uh, Armando prepared a great presentation for today. He will share many tips and tricks that will help guide your thinking in creating successful products or services, regardless of your role in the company. Before we start, I need to say thank you to our sponsors, the Stylers Group, which is a software development agency focusing on digital transformation and e-commerce solutions, and the Braining Hub, which is an educational center that curates corporate trainings and hand-on courses on subjects such as AI, data science, and many programming languages. I also need to say thank you to the team behind the scenes who helps organize all these events. If you have any questions during the presentation, please write them into the Q&A section and we'll try to answer all of them after the presentation. I believe that's all. Hey Armando, welcome. Thank you for being here today. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today, everybody. I'm super excited to share some of my presentation and some of my experience with all of you. So I'm happy to talk to you today. I've prepared a presentation and let me start sharing my screen. Here we go. Let me go full screen. So again, thank you for having me today. My name is Armando Santana. I'm a director of product for a startup called Papa, and I'll go into a little bit of my background. But really, what I have to talk to you guys about today is, I've gone through this wonderful journey working on multiple products in my career, and I've learned a lot of different things. And so I'm here to share some of the best practices, some of the tips, some of the themes that I've noticed of what does it really take to build products that people are going to love. Products and services. This definitely applies to services as well. So when I say products, I really kind of mean products and services. And so the agenda for today, and by the way, I will make the slides available to everybody, after my presentation. So feel free to, take notes if you like, but you will have access to these slides. And so there's a couple of themes. There's about 6 themes that I want to speak about with you guys today, and really kind of tell you a little bit of my journey, my story working at these wonderful companies, wonderful products, and really kind of talk about each of these pieces of it. My experience, what are the mindset and the themes that it really takes to build these wonderful products. The passion that it takes to really kind of dive in and really do what you love to do, what it takes to do innovation, the leadership behind it. And when it comes down to it at the end of my presentation, originally I started with working at these big companies, and the last 2 roles that I've had have been at startups. And so my career has transitioned from all these lessons learned. I have the great opportunity to apply it in a startup environment, right? And so I've learned to appreciate that it's now more than about building a product or a service. It's really about building a company as well. And so that's a little bit of where I'm coming from. So a little bit of my background, just so that you guys kind of appreciate a little bit of my journey. I started off as an engineer. The first 8 years of my career, I was at Disney in their R&D group, building prototypes and developing code. And really, I was a software engineer, wrote a lot of code in C, C++, graphics programming, all of that. Really enjoyed it. And I was an engineer that just loved to problem solve. And through my career, I started to evolve and grow my skill set. And I became a technology manager. And then I got a lot of feedback from my manager saying, hey, you have the potential to continue to grow and be that product leader. And so I transitioned my career from being an engineer essentially for 11 years to becoming a product manager and working in tech. And certainly worked, a number of these companies, and the last two, again, have been with a startup. And so when you think of a product manager, I stole some of some of these graphics from the web just to help communicate a little bit of my point. But a product manager has to be multifaceted, right? And there is kind of conversation, you've seen comments out there about product managers are almost like mini CEOs, where they have to be able to have wear multiple hats, have multiple skills. And so for me as a product manager, I really enjoy having the opportunity and challenge myself in different aspects of product management. So if you look at it from a breakdown point of view, 20% has to do with working with engineering and thinking like an engineer and doing, Scrum planning and Agile and requirements and planning and execution with engineering, right? There's communication. You have to be able to effectively communicate with stakeholders and customers. You got to be able to understand design and good user experience and being an advocate for your users. And then being able to understand the business aspect of, the idea or the company or the service, and really understanding how is this going to make money? How is it viable? What's the business model? All of those kind of things come into play when you are a product manager. And so I always challenge our engineering team, our engineering leadership, anybody that I worked with on my team, I really challenge them to think about some of these other areas. So even though you're a product manager, you want to challenge, let's say, your tech leads or some of your engineering leads to understand the design aspect of the product or the business implications, and help them think a little bit like a product manager, because your team is kind of an extension of the product and you as the leader. So I really kind of challenge the thinking around there. So the first theme I want to talk about is about passion. This was something, early on in my career, right out of college, I went to work for Disney Imagineering R&D. And it's an R&D group that is challenged with, thinking about new ideas. And one of the things I really learned about my experience at Disney was about communication, not communication, but the storytelling aspect of your idea. So you have to be very good at telling the story of your product. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What is the emotional connection that your customers have with your product and service, and being able to tell that story. And so I love these photographs. These are like during the early days of Walt Disney pitching his ideas and his concepts. And so one of the things I really enjoyed at Disney is having these meetings where, the person who's pitching the idea, who's responsible for the execution of the idea, really given the chance to present and really tell the story from the perspective of the user, or kind of the strategy behind it. People really rally behind stories. And so, you have to have passion. If you really have passion about things, it will come very natural for you to share your idea. And I'm sure some of you, have your own products and services you're working on, find opportunities for you to share that and refine that elevator pitch, refine, how are you communicating the value behind your product and service? So storytelling is a really important piece of it. And what's interesting here is it ties into marketing as well. Like once you mature as a company, it ties into marketing. So that's one. Two, creating magical end-to-end guest experiences. At Disney, it's really interesting. We don't call customers customers. We call them our guests. And that's a really interesting concept, because it kind of changed the thinking and the paradigm around, oh, it's not just a customer, it's our guest into our home and this wonderful world of our characters and our, the wonderful stories that we have to tell. And so that kind of changes your mindset a little bit. And so, even to this day, I try to ask myself, how am I creating magical moments and magical interaction points with our customer? And making and being mindful of the full journey, not just like when they start using your application or you start using your service. It's like, how is the guest experience end to end from the time they learn about you and they go to the web and they purchase it and they interact with it, when they have issues with it, how can we resolve issues and things like that. So be mindful of the end-to-end guest experience. The other thing from in our division, we prototype quite often. And so one of the things I really appreciated is the art of prototyping, and we would call it play testing. But think of this as beta testing, or having early indications if your idea is working. We would do these very, very often at Disney. And being able to work in a very agile environment where you're like rapidly prototyping and getting to the essence of the experience that you're trying to test, that's something that became very valuable. And so that's something that becomes really valuable in a startup environment, because you're trying to iterate and de-risk some of these ideas and validate them in the marketplace before you invest even further. We were fantastic in doing that at Disney. We celebrated even failures. So whenever things didn't go well, we would constantly ask ourselves, like, why, and what is it that can get better, and we would iterate and do it all over again. And then the last piece here in the fourth bullet points is around high quality always wins. It's very easy to just go fast sometimes, but one of the things I really appreciated at Disney is that our leadership always challenged us to making sure that we produce quality output, high quality, and we held each other accountable. So working with our design team, sometimes we would move very quickly, but our design leadership really was mindful that at the end of the day, it's Disney's reputation and Disney's, kind of commitment around quality. And so we always tried to do that. But there was other things that I kind of learned and appreciated during my experience there. One of them is do not fall in love with your idea too much. I think in early in my career, I had tons of ideas. I remember being in college and I bought all these domains and I had all these ideas, and your head is spinning. It's like, oh, I want to work on all these wonderful things, and it's fascinating to be thinking about these ideas, but don't fall in love with them too much. Really challenge yourself and getting feedback from others, from the market. Look at it from a different perspective. It's very easy to get blindsided by the fact that, you fall in love with it too much, that you lose visibility on some of the other parameters that contribute to its success or failure, right? So be mindful of that. This is the other thing that I did a lot of mistakes early in my career. I thought I knew what I was doing sometimes, and sometimes I would make assumptions because I wanted to move fast and I wanted to prove myself. And so one of the tips that I have for you guys is don't make assumptions out of convenience. What that means is that don't make some assumptions just because you want to do what you want to do, or just because you want to move forward, or you just want to prove others and things like that. Those are just some examples. Like, really ask yourself, really question everything, and really kind of probe and work with others and get feedback from others, communicate. It's very easy to just make some assumptions and move forward. Like, really, really peel the onion and really kind of dive into whatever you're working on. Because I made quite a bit of mistakes early on around that, where I just made some assumptions just for the sake of, it was really convenient and just moving forward. And so that ties into kind of also the next piece is around communication. So at Qualcomm, I'll share the story on the picture I have on the right, but at Qualcomm, one of the things I really appreciated there is innovation. But in order to do innovation, I worked very closely with a lot of engineers at Qualcomm. And one of the things I learned to appreciate a lot there was about communication and what I call shared understanding. So theme number 2 is about taking communication to the next level. And I like to preach that it's not just about communicating, it's also about making sure that everybody has a shared understanding of what we're trying to get alignment on. So early on in my career, I would just kind of communicate, but I didn't really take the time to make sure and validate that they truly understood what I was trying to communicate. And so you want to kind of be patient in like communicating, but also kind of understanding to make sure that they understand what you're trying to communicate. So having more patience around that. And that's really, really important, especially nowadays with remote work and remote teams. It's very easy to just kind of send a message through Slack or whatever tool you guys use, and then assume again that they know, but they don't, right? And so making sure that you have the collaborative sessions and making sure that there's you're doing beyond communications. I say here, shared understanding is beyond communication. And so that contributes to excellence and innovation and engineering. I love working with engineers. You know, I was an engineer in my first part of my career, and I just love working with them and really working together and solving interesting problems and interesting challenges. And so communication is really key. The other thing about my experience at Qualcomm was I was very adamant about defending the customer experience. Sometimes when you're working with highly technical teams, they're so married with the technical solution that sometimes it's easy to lose sight of what is the problem you're trying to solve. Like, is this the right thing to do for our users? Because we're so in love with the technical marvel and the technical solution that's being built. So I was very vocal in a lot of my experience at Qualcomm around, you know, let's start with let's talk about the customer. What's that customer experience, and let that influence some of the direction that we need to take as an engineering team. And so like one of the tips down here that I have is do not overlook the problem you're solving, and if it's even worth solving. You know, some of it's very easy again to fall in love with the technical solution. And so sometimes you need to step back, like, is this really the right problem for us to solve right now? You know, how many users, how much impact does this have? What's the business model behind that? Like, question all of that to really kind of inform the decision making that needs to happen when you're working with your engineering teams. Um, the other thing that I learned a lot at Qualcomm was the value of partnerships. You know, everybody's good at you know, on you know, certain things that they're experts in, but sometimes as part of your strategy, you have to be thinking broadly. You know, if you're going to scale your product or service, who are other players in the market and what are they doing, and how can we grow the pie, how can we grow the experience, to really kind of evaluate where there's partnerships that could be leveraged and what's kind of part of your strategy around that. At Qualcomm, it was all about you know, enabling the mobile ecosystem, and so I learned a lot about the value of partnerships. So don't overlook that. It's very easy to kind of get into working on what you're working on, but network a lot. Talk to other you know, other individuals in the space. Find ways that you can leverage partnerships. That's something that you know, I saw that was very successful at Qualcomm. And the last thing I have here on this slide was, you know, do not overlook the business model behind your product. There's, you know, at Qualcomm, we tried to create these wonderful products and services. You know, we had some success, but also some failures, and some of it, you know, was experience driven. Some of it was, hey, the business model is just not going to work based on how it's, you know, it's been defined. So, you know, really ask those kind of questions, especially early on before, you know, investments are being made in a big way for some products and services. Like, really validate the business model. And so it was very interesting. So one of my last projects at Qualcomm was building a tablet. And Qualcomm had this MEMS technology called Mirasol. And it was a reflective piece of technology at the time we were trying to build a tablet. And so I was in the lab, and this was a moment, and many of you probably remember, where you were at when you found out when Steve Jobs passed away. And it was very interesting. I was in the lab working with our engineers. We were doing some testing, and one of our engineers comes in and is like, "Oh, did you hear Steve Jobs passed away?" I was like, "Oh man, no way." We knew he was not well and things like that, but it was one of those moments where immediately in that moment, I just decided to, go to apple.com on the tablet we were just working on, right? And I took the snapshot as just a reminder of like, hey, like life is pretty short. Like you should be working on things that you're super passionate about. And it was like a moment in time where I was like, okay, am I doing what I need to be doing, right? And I was so focused on the customer experience. And so it was very interesting. I went to China. We had some partners out there, and I had this aha moment when I was out there, going like, hey, am I on the right path in my career? And it was really interesting when I came back. Um, in the mail, I opened my mailbox, right? And I get my mail, and this magazine is in my mailbox. And it's Jeff Bezos at Amazon, right? And I'm going like, oh God, oh man, what does this mean, right? And I was looking at like, what does this mean in the world? To me, like I'm getting a sign. And literally, guys, the next week, I get a phone call from Amazon that they're opening a division in Southern California in Irvine, working on the Amazon Kindle Fire. They had just launched the first generation Kindle Fire, and they're starting to work on the second generation. And for me, it was a moment in time where I really like took that moment and cherished it and really prepared for my interviews and went to interview at Amazon, and I got the job at Amazon. And it was amazing. I was the product manager responsible for the Kindle Fire set of tablets. They had a suite of tablets, and I was responsible for the App Store experience. And so I went to work for Amazon, and that was really the area where I learned product management and customer obsession. And you guys have probably read about Amazon. There's no shortage of articles and lots of stories about them. Amazing how they operate. They are truly customer obsessed. Like everybody in the company is empowered to really start from the customer and work backwards. And it really transcends everywhere. I mean, it was a joy to work with engineers, because the engineers literally were not thinking, most of them were really thinking about the customer and working backwards. And so it's like going back to a shared understanding, right? There's like a shared vision around the customer, is the center focus around this. And one of the things I learned about Amazon is about leadership as well. They are huge around leadership, and leadership transcends all parts of the company. So just because you're, let's say, a junior engineer doesn't mean you can't be a leader. Everybody's empowered to be a leader in their own domain. So, as you're building products and services and building a company, you got to ask yourself, how can I be building a culture where I'm enabling people to be leaders in whatever they're working on? And so that's something that I really challenge you guys to be thinking about, is enabling people to be leaders, thinking about the customer first, and creating a culture where the best idea must win. At Amazon, we used a lot of data. Certainly, you think of Amazon, millions and millions of customers and, billions of transactions across the world. And there's a lot of data, right, that they captured. And we, as product managers, were always empowered to making data-driven decisions. There's a lot of wonderful stories around, how they've used data to create great products. And one of the things I'll share a story here about my experience and how we worked really hard to defend the customer experience. So, and I'll bounce around a little bit here. So there's a case study here that I want to share with you. So this was the end product that we built on the right-hand side. So when I joined the team, the Kindle experience was very much driven by books. The book experience was the hero experience. And we were very much being directed by the mothership. So we were in Southern California. The rest of most of the teams were up in Seattle, and we were being told like, oh, you need to build an app store experience, but it needs to follow the book shopping experience. And so we were given, a style guide and some creative direction to go build an app store that looks similar to books, because books was, the lead experience. And we tried initially to build a shopping experience, and I don't have any concepts to share with you guys because that's all confidential, but we were trying to build an experience using books. And so we felt really pressured to build this experience that was like book. And we're like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right, right? And you looked at it like Apple and Google with their Google Play Store, it was a very app-driven experience. And our team got together, and my lead designer and I got together. It was like, this doesn't feel right. This is not right. And so we started deviating from the direction. We build different concepts, and the design that we came up with was coming up with these billboards. We call them billboards, but these marketing banners at the very top with rich graphics and rich ways of communicating, and showcasing these new apps. And by the way, this was a design that Apple had not come out yet. So we were building this, and it was interesting when we launched this new experience, Apple at the same time had launched an update to their app store, which kind of had similar design elements. And I remember the lead designer and I kind of looked at each other, and we kind of just grinned because we felt like we were on the right path. Like we came up with a solution that was very similar to what Apple did. But back to this kind of story was, I had to go up to Seattle and basically break the news to the leadership team on the rest of the Kindle Fire team and say, hey guys, I know you guys gave us direction to go build an experience that was kind of influenced by books, but unfortunately, no, that's not what we're going to do. We built this new experience. This is what we believe is the best thing for our customers. We tested it with a few customers. We got good positive feedback, and we felt like this is the direction that we need to go to. And there was certainly pushback, and there was some healthy dialogue around that, but ultimately we were able to convince them that it was the right thing to do for our business and for our customers. And at the end of the day, I remember, them approving our recommendation, and our VP within our group kind of sending us a note of, acknowledging that we were very much fighting for our customer and what was best for them. And so that year, at the end of that year, we launched, 3 different tablets with an experience that we thought was, best in class at the time for apps. So it was fantastic. Let me move forward. So back to kind of the next kind of theme is connected to the prior one. So customer obsession is 3. 4 is around leadership. And again, it ties into Amazon. So Amazon, I highly encourage you guys to go on the web and search for leadership principles at Amazon and read through these. They're really fascinating. I've always tried to challenge our team to kind of borrow some of these principles and integrate them into how we operate. But there's 14 of them, and there's 5 that I really like. I'm a huge fan of. One is customer obsession, which I really talked about. Number 3 is about invent and simplify. It's really easy to fall in love again with your idea and over-engineer things. And so one of the things that we try to embrace, and I try to challenge our team, is to be creative and be very creative and inventive in solutions. Keep them manageable, simplify it, and then iterate. And so really question yourself around, the complexity of what you're trying to build. Like really kind of get to the essence. What's the core essence of the experience that you're trying to create, and try to simplify it. And sometimes you'll find moments where you can simplify the amount of work that needs to happen in order to get that release out. And so that's a principle that I really enjoy sharing with our engineering team. 8 is, I love number 8. 8 is very ingrained to how I operate, like operating with a sense of urgency. So bias for action is really, really embracing not having to wait. Like, let's like go, take initiative, in moving things forward. And so I'm one of those persons that, will ask for help and things like that. But if I don't get the help, I'll just go to someone else, or I'll find another creative way to move the ball forward. And so you want individuals on your team who are working with a sense of urgency and having this bias for action of like, guys, we need to go. Like, come on, like we can't just be waiting here. We got to keep going. 10 is always be curious, always be learning. Each of us become experts in our own domain, but there is so much opportunity to continue learning, and finding ways of how it helps you connect the dots. I'm huge about connecting dots. I'm always looking for ways for how I can elevate my understanding of other pieces of the puzzle that impact what I'm trying to accomplish and what I'm working on. So always be asking yourself, am I learning? How does this work? How does this other team is operating? How can that tie into my team? Like, always be curious and learning about, within your team, what's happening out in industry. The fact that you're here is like huge, right? You're embracing, learning from others and things like that. Always take that to heart. We're always learning. Life is a lifelong journey of learning. And then 13, it was something that was kind of new to me when I joined Amazon. It was really interesting to watch. 13 has have backbone, disagree, and commit. So when you have amazing people working together, there will be moments where you don't always agree. Okay, there will be moments where you don't agree on a decision or something that needs to be made, something about the product or service. And there will be a decision that has to be made. You have to make a decision because you got to move forward, right? And sometimes a decision is made, in a consensus way. Sometimes it's done by leadership, sometimes done by the product manager. But at the end of the day, when a decision is made, you have to say, I disagree with that, but you know what? I respect the decision and I'm going to commit to it. If that can't happen, there will be friction. There will be, moments where there's friction among people or the leadership team. So at Amazon, I saw this a few times where we had engineers who were very passionate about something, and then we decided not to do that. And I saw them got kind of disappointed, and they certainly expressed their frustration, but then pivoted 180 and said, got it. I disagree with that, but I get it. I'm going to commit to it and let's go. Right. And it was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, for them to have the ability to pivot and say, I got it, let's go. We're a team. Let's go. Right. And so that's pretty important piece of working together as a team. You have to have the backbone to do that at times. And so keep that in mind. So 4 is around leadership. 5 is about, you're building a company, not just a product. Now that I've transitioned into, more of a director role, and I have, I'm managing product lines and managing people, and how we have teams working together, and I'm in the startup life now. One of the things I've grown to appreciate is that part of my job is to help people grow, and that helps grow the company, helps grow the product. And so really now it's about empowering teams to do great work and asking yourself, what are you doing as a leader to enable this culture that allows your people to grow? And being mindful of how you recruit, how you build your team, how you build culture. How do you stay agile and work with a sense of urgency? And it ties back to some of those principles. They help to provide that guiding light around how do we operate in the sense of urgency, good culture, good teamwork. It's about growing together. It's okay to make mistakes. If you make a mistake, that's okay. We'll figure out a path to move forward. And so we, in the last two companies, I would meet with my teams often to get feedback on how we're doing, how we can iterate, how can we get better. I've learned better now about when to say no. Earlier in your career, you're constantly going like yes, 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 because you want to prove to yourself, you want to get the experience, you want to, dive in, and you're hungry. But as you kind of grow in your career, certainly you're hungry, but you're being more mindful of how you're using your time. And how do you become more efficient in saying yes to things and saying no to things? And you start thinking more about, is what I'm building built for scale? So don't forget that ultimately you're designing a product and service that certainly you're trying to prove in the now, but are you designing it and building it in a way that it can scale? And so that's something that I've really kind of learned about and have embraced it. So growth mindset is that piece. The last one, I don't have a slide on this, but it kind of ties into this, is around prioritization. There only is a limited amount of time, and so it's really, really important to prioritize. But one of the lens that I use, and how I operate and how I interview and how I kind of see things when I'm in a company is around the 3 P's: people, process, and product. And I'm always thinking about how can we improve each of these 3 components to build great products. And so I'm always looking at it from that lens, is what can we do to improve how we're operating. And as you're working on things, prioritization becomes a big piece of it, and that's an area that I've always looked at, and I try to do a better job. And so being mindful of that is something that I highly recommend. So again, passion, shared understanding, customer obsession, leadership, growth mindset, and prioritizing ruthlessly. Those are like the 6 themes that I really highly encourage you guys to take to heart. And the last thing I want to leave with you guys, and it goes back to kind of this growth mindset, is always work hard, and everybody has gifts to share with the world. I truly believe that everybody has skills to contribute to the world, and be mindful of the fact that you're always each of us were kids at one point in time, and you remember being a kid and always being in this curious state and happy and learning and curious about the world. Like challenge yourself, like think about what brings you joy, and really kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you go through your career, and ask yourself, am I working on the right things that I'm passionate about? And if so, great. If not, like challenge yourself. It's okay to be like I mentor a lot of younger professionals too, and it's okay at the beginning part of your career to be working on things that maybe you're not as passionate about, but it's a stepping stone. You're learning, but as you grow in your career, you will find things that you're super passionate about, and that will be part of your guiding light. So anyways, that's all I have. Thank you so much. That's my email if you guys want to reach out to me. If you type in that URL, that takes you to my LinkedIn profile. Happy to connect with any of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Armando. It was a really good presentation, full with useful information. I really, really enjoyed it the second time as well. You definitely improved it since the last time I saw that in the San Diego Tech Hub. So yeah, that's the time. Everybody, if you guys have any question, please send it into the chat or the Q&A, and Armando will be happy to answer that. I have one question to you. It's so we saw that you worked for many big companies like Amazon, Qualcomm, Disney, whatever, and now lately you are working for or smaller startups. I believe those are smaller in size, much smaller in size, right? So
Yes.
what's the big difference when you're working at a huge company and creating product in a small department, most likely, and what's the big difference when you are designing products at a startup? What you should do differently?
Yeah, a great question. Um, some of the differences that I've seen, I mean, number one has to do with resources. Like with when you're in a startup environment, you don't have the same amount of resources as a bigger company. So you have to be more laser focused on what is your MVP, what are you trying to build. The decisions that you're making from a startup perspective are really, really important because you only have a limited amount of time and resources. And sometimes there's time associated with that, right? So you have to do a better job defining like what you need to build is really, really important because you have a limited amount of resources. So limited resources was number one. Um, Two, I think in a startup environment, you have more opportunities to contribute. Um, like the technical leads and the product manager have more responsibility, and there's a lot more autonomy. Like you have more, I don't want to say control, but you have more influence in the direction of where the product goes. And so there's a lot of I believe there's a lot of opportunity to make an impact. And this is like one of the reasons why people select startups is that they find that they have an opportunity to make more of an impact than larger companies. Larger companies, you will work on a smaller piece of the puzzle, on the a bigger part of the strategy. And so yeah, you're working on these things, but they're moving the needle very small. At a startup, you're moving things that move huge parts of the company, right? And so there's a lot of reward and appreciation for that. Like you really enjoy that piece of it, but at the same time, you have to really put in the effort and the time to making sure that you're making the right decisions. And so there's a difference in that as well. Um, the other thing is, with bigger companies, there's usually multiple layers of approval. And at startups, you're moving pretty fast. I mean, you are, making decisions and you're going, right? It's one of those things where you're asking, you get a little bit of approval, but you're very much empowered to go. So I really enjoy that piece of the experience where you're not constantly having to ask for like approval, buy-in. Like one of the things I'll be honest with you, one of the things I did not enjoy at Qualcomm was their culture was very consensus driven, which meant that you as the product manager had to go to this person and get approval. Like, okay, yeah, you got it. Yeah. And then this person, okay, yeah. And you had to make the rounds to get everybody to buy in because you had to get consensus from everybody before you move forward. And sometimes it would just drive me crazy because I just want to go, right? We thought we had enough information, we had enough there to just go, and we had to get feedback from multiple, stakeholders. And so, I mean, some of that it is what it is. You have to just operate within that environment. But yeah, those are a few things that kind of come to mind.
Yeah, someone was asking which one do you enjoy more?
So that's a trick question. That's a trick question because I actually enjoyed all of them because it was at different parts in my career, right? Like in the early part of my career, I was not prepared to work at a startup. The way I see it and the way I tell people is like, it's amazing when you go work for like Disney or Qualcomm or one of those big companies, they're paying you to learn is the way you can be thinking about it. Like they're paying you to learn. That's amazing. Like you're having fun, you're learning, you're getting paid for it. That's amazing, right? So I love those experiences. And even though some of them were, some were great, some were painful in certain situations, but I saw everything as a learning opportunity. And so for me to say like, oh, which one did I enjoy more? I actually enjoyed all of them. because it was all part of the path. It was all part of the path to continue to grow as an individual and as a professional. And now that I'm working in a more startup environment, everything I've learned, all the experiences I've had up to this point have basically now molded me to give me the tools and the experience to work at a startup. And so now I'm really enjoying the startup environment because I've already made all those mistakes. I've already kind of done all those things wrong. And now I get an opportunity to do things the right way, right? And some of them, and I still make mistakes up to this point because, as you guys know, tech always changes. The market always changes, and there's new tools, and there's new processes, and there's individuals that you're working with, and people like to work in different ways. And so I'm always learning, but I have enjoyed all of them. And so for me, if you ask me like which job did you enjoy the most, I feel like I've enjoyed every single one in their own way. But right now I'm definitely enjoying the startup environment. And I really love to be in that position to really make an impact. So
Well,
hopefully,
yeah, and where is this path leading you now? Actually, what I exactly wanted to ask. What are your
yeah,
current and future goals?
yeah, no, that's a great question. So back to like getting paid to learn, right? Like I'm getting paid to learn to work at a startup to hopefully one day do my own startup, right? So I'm also thinking about what do I do now moving forward. Certainly the company I'm working at, I'm really happy, and we're growing like crazy at a in this kind of industry. We're in the digital health space. And I'm telling myself, okay, I need to commit myself to X amount of years. Oh, that's another piece of feedback that I have for you guys. Once you make a decision and you feel pretty confident on the career choice and what you want to do, you need to spend at least, I would say, between 2 and 3 years committed to it. You have to have enough time to become kind of an expert and grow within that opportunity, and kind of go through a life cycle of experiencing, building the product, shipping it out, getting feedback, changing it, iterating it, pivoting. Like you have to have this whole life cycle journey to really get all these experiences and have essentially the scar tissue around how it went end to end. You have to have that whole experience. You don't want to just go to a company for a year and then go to another one for another year and then another one for another year. You see that on some individuals that are just constantly hopping, and sometimes it all depends. If you're in consulting, that's fine, but if you're building true products and services that have like life cycles, you got to be there a certain time. So for me, I've certainly committed to being at a startup at a certain window of time, contributing, learning, and then deciding, okay, what do I do next? But to answer your question, I believe I will do my own startup at some point, or I have certain ideas. I'm always finding inspiration, finding interesting problems. But I think I'll probably do that, if not work for another startup. But startup is really the industry that I'm going to be continued to focus on.
Because of all those rewards, right? That you getting when you building every day, it's a different challenge. Every day you actually have to deliver something, and it is rewarding. I'm in the same space right now, and I must say it is rewarding.
It is. It's very rewarding. It's very rewarding. And working with great people too. There's really great people who want to make an impact. And I think you'll find people who choose the startup path. They're very passionate about something or get inspired. They want to make an impact. So when you have people who want to make an impact, it's really fun working with those kinds of individuals. Yeah. What resources do you use to keep improving your skills? I am always networking. One of the things I'm huge on is networking on LinkedIn. I try to attend product management webinars. There's a product con is like a conference here in the West Coast, and that I try to attend. I always find blogs, just constantly reading books. one of the head of product for the Whoop band, actually this one right, the Whoop band. He recently came out with a book around product management. So reading product management books, I'm always kind of looking at that. I always collaborate also with the other product managers on our team. We meet, on a bi-weekly basis. We share some best practices. And it's just not you, right? It's about using your network to increase your expertise. And what I also do is I try to take some of these tips that I come across, and I try to implement them in a strategic way with our team, and then I get feedback to see if it worked. And so we have on our engineering teams, we have 2-week sprints. We do a retro at the end of a sprint, and we get feedback. And all the feedback that I get is pretty much anonymous, so that everybody has the freedom to share anything. Some engineers are a little bit shy or feel like, if they say something, it's going to be used against them. So we keep feedback completely anonymous. And I tell them, you can say anything to me, good or bad. I want to hear feedback. And so sometimes I test new things and I get feedback, because you may get a tip that you feel like, oh, that's an amazing tip, I'm going to do that. You try it, and then your team doesn't like it, or it didn't work in your organization for any number of reasons, right? Like not two companies are built the same. So you as a product leader have to it's back to connecting the dots. Like you have a culture in a company, and here's how others are doing it. And you try to take nuggets of information, you try to ingest it, you test it and see if it worked. Oh, that worked, or it didn't. You then adjust and pivot. And so I try to do those things. So it's about learning and getting better at what you're doing, but also finding ways of how does it work within your own organization. And you try things and then get feedback if it's working. Because you can get really good at certain things, but then if you try to use them in your in a weekly basis within your team and it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, right? So you got to adapt.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see cultural differences in product development goals? I mean, as I see a lot of US companies is focused on entertainment. Meanwhile, European companies I know has much more business sector focus. If you have similar experiences, what do you think? What are your reasons? Interesting. I think the US market, I think there's a level of, if you think about just the companies that you like, when you think about the US, right? You think of like the big companies, Apple and Google and Facebook and Amazon. Like you think of those companies, even gaming companies, EA. You think of Disney. These big companies. Part of my feeling here is that they get a lot of attention. They're very consumer facing, and they get attention from the media, from the world of tech. They have a lot of consumers, and quite honestly, I think in the U.S. market, and there's some of this in the European market too, but the U.S. we love our entertainment, right? We love our sports. We love entertainment. We love in part, I have a theory around this. Part of it is because, we're workaholics in the US too. Like we work hard, but we also like to enjoy and have downtime. Like I'm in the early stage of my career, I wasn't big on games. I've always felt like games were a waste of time. Like, why are you playing video games? Why do you play games? Like those are a waste of time. But I later came to appreciate that it's a distraction. It's a form of entertainment. It's a form of kind of recharging your batteries from being stuck in whatever you're working on, right? And so I feel like the U.S. market really embraces consumer products, consumer experiences. And so there's a lot of attention in some of those. And some of those services completely transcend and they're available in Europe. It's almost like they were built and designed in the US, and then they become globalized. They become, launched in European markets. And I think, I think there's companies sort of constantly asking themselves, where's their opportunities to use technology to become more efficient in any particular industry. And so I think some of the European countries, so European companies, I would say, they're looking at it from a point of view is like, where are we strong at? You know, we have these excellent talent, amazing engineers and amazing people in Europe. Where can we help and compete and be provide value, not only, you know, within the European markets, but even globally? And so maybe part of what's going on there is like, oh, we can build better business products that can improve the efficiency of the business sector. And we have amazing people who can actually solve these amazing problems that provide value to businesses. And so, you know, maybe part of that is happening. And, you know, from a broad perspective is that these companies are looking at ways that they can compete. Now, there's a fair amount of companies that are doing entertainment products. There's a bunch of game companies and things like that that are happening in Europe. I remember talking to a few of them when I was working at Qualcomm and working on augmented reality. We had an AR SDK. We made a rounds in Europe just talking with game companies, and you know, we went and met with Lego, with Hasbro, and you know, EA. There's a bunch of game companies that are out there and game studios. So there's a fair amount of that activity happening out there as well. But you know, I feel like US really enjoys their entertainment. I think it's one of those things that we really embrace it, and people are willing to spend the money when it comes down to it. So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of my thoughts on that. Cool. Any other questions? It's been fun talking with you guys.
Yeah, looks like we run out of the questions for now. Yeah, thank you very much, Armando, for sharing all this knowledge with us. It was really great.
You're welcome. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you all. Good luck with whatever you are doing. Please reach out and network. And you know, thanks again for having me.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today.